Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast, the United States reportedly interfering with Israel's coalition negotiations. Iranian suicide drones used by Russia discovered to be powered by Israeli-made tech. And Antiquities looters caught red-handed in the Bedouin city of Rahat. Returning to the coalition talks in Jerusalem, negotiations for the 37th Israeli government still apparently stalling behind key ministerial appointments. And now complicating things further, it seems that the United States is getting more involved. ILTV's Aaron Ports reports.
As the coalition talks continue to stall, presumably incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting the rumors and insisting that he will not form a government without all of his right-wing partners, including, of course, the religious Zionist party under Chairman Bezalel Smotrich. Then to sweeten the pot for Smotrich, with whom negotiations are stalling, Netanyahu reportedly agreeing to demands to legalize dozens of outposts in Judea and Samaria, as well as the Chomesh Yeshiva, and connecting infrastructure like roads and highways within 2 months of forming a coalition. But Smotrich's demands for the defense and/or finance ministry are still too much for the would-be prime minister to oblige, adding to fears that the talks will fail to bear fruit, especially ahead of Netanyahu's self-imposed deadline to finalize the list of appointments by Wednesday, November 22nd. Additionally, aside from the pressures from within his own Likud party to withhold such portfolios from the controversial MK, it seems that the United States is likewise influencing Netanyahu's decisions against Smotrich. Following a meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Tom Nides, Netanyahu is saying that for the sake of the continued cooperation with Washington, Israel needs to act moderately in terms of security and diplomacy, especially in Judea and Samaria, and at least for the remainder of President Biden's term in the White House. Meanwhile, contrary to rumors that they're breaking promises and negotiating with Netanyahu to join his government, outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, and Netanyahu himself are calling any such talk fake news. That said, such partnerships would certainly help Netanyahu in his negotiations with Smotrich, as their inclusion in the government would dilute Smotrich's power to make demands. And politically, there's not much difference between parties like the Likud and Gantz's National Unity, for example.
The investigation into the death of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh continues to make headlines. The FBI findings investigations report will be submitted to Congress within about a month and no later than December 14. It will be filed as an unclassified document and will be available to the general public through the U.S. State Department website, says Representative of the state of Indiana in Congress, the Democrat Andre Carson, who led the fight to open the investigation into the death of Abu Akleh and initiated the Justice for Shireen Act. This week, Defense Minister Benny Gantz announced that Israel would not cooperate with likely FBI investigation, and Prime Minister Yair Lapid added that the IDF soldiers will not be investigated by the FBI, nor in the hands of any foreign body or foreign country, how friendly it may be. According to Carson, more than looking for people to blame for the death of the journalist, the investigation will focus on the involvement of the United States itself in the incident, whether through American weapons, services, or military equipment provided to the IDF soldiers. It cannot be that American weapons will be used to kill Americans on foreign soil. American taxpayers should not pay for cases of human rights violations abroad, says Carson. The FBI refused to provide details about the investigation. And joining me now on recent pressure from the U.S. is attorney and public diplomacy expert Ran Bar Yoshafat. Ran, thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here.
First off, we see the United States calling on Netanyahu to reject Smotrich as a defense minister, and Netanyahu is apparently listening also. But what kind of precedent does this set? I mean, regardless of what we think of Smotrich, should Israel allow the United States to interfere with our democratic processes?
So I'll start with the obvious. America is Israel's greatest ally and vice versa. They say that America's biggest air carrier cannot be sunk because it's Israel. So countries have great relations. However, it is not very common for countries to interfere with other countries' coalition building. Also, America is a democracy, and they know that democracy means the will of the people. So other countries cannot interfere with the building of the coalition. Can they say what they think should be better in other countries? They're allowed to, but they can definitely not implement their agenda inside what our people want and what our coalition would look like.
Let's look at the other side. I mean, is there any instance where Israel tried to implement influence politics in the United States? And if so, what would they say about it?
it's okay for countries to wish for other countries to work differently. I think that Israel would want America to have a stronger hand against, for instance, violations by the UN against Israel, and the fact that the UN is turning a blind eye against all of the human rights violations done by other countries. There are many things that Israel can wish for the states to do more. On the other hand, I think that America has done an amazing amount of work for Israel. But the main point is that in the concept of democracies, one country does not interfere with the election of another country. That's sabotaging democracy. So yes, obviously Israel will not interfere with, the decisions that are going to be made in Congress, for instance.
Regardless of who becomes defense minister, Netanyahu is saying that the government needs to be conservative with what they do in Judea and Samaria because of ties to the U.S. How will religious Zionist party deal with this? I mean, their whole campaign was based on nationalistic principles.
Yeah, I think that about 11% of the people who traditionally voted for Likud voted for the religious Zionist party because they wanted to make sure that Netanyahu will go with Smotrich and Ben Gvir and will not turn away to Yair Lapid or Benny Gantz. And I think that was the reason why they got so many seats. They were trying to make sure that Netanyahu is locked in the right. Does that mean that Smotrich has to be the Minister of Defense? I don't know. I think that the main argument of the Tzniut Datit was that they're going to change the judicial system. And I think that that's the main issue right now for the right-wingers in Israel. But yes, by all means, I think that there's a pressure right now on Netanyahu from the right-wing voters to say, finally have a chance to have a full right-wing party, parliament, as they say, a full right-wing government. Now is your chance. Let Smotrich and Ben Gvir have meaningful ministerial responsibilities so we will actually implement a right-wing policy.
So he's kind of in the middle. And now regarding Smotrich, why is he so hell-bent on being defense minister? I mean, if he doesn't get his demands, would he truly risk blowing up the new government now?
I don't know. I have no idea what's on his mind, and I also don't know if that is the actual case. Maybe Smotrich is just saying that because that's how you negotiate. I think that Smotrich and Ben Gvir are going to push for the recognition of the settlements, some of them at least. And I do believe and hope that they will ask for the IDF and the police to use more power when it comes to stopping terrorist attacks. But I'm not sure that that's the only thing that they are focusing on. I don't know why Smotrich cannot be the Minister of Justice. Maybe that's where he really wants, and maybe it's just a negotiation trick. I have no idea. Basically, the only thing that we know is stuff that people say and post to the media. We don't know what is really happening behind the scene. We do hope, at least the right-wingers hope, that this coalition will be a stable one. And for this coalition to be a stable one, it means that all parties need to be happy. The Likud needs to be happy, Shas needs to be happy, Yadut Torah needs to be happy, and Tzniut Datit need to be happy. So for that, you have to have probably more ministers than necessary. And now it's just a question, how do you divide the cake?
Ran, where do you see it going in the coming days?
Prophecy was given to the fools. If there's one thing that I know today, is that I know less than what I think I knew. At the end of the day, I think that if Netanyahu does not form a far right-wing coalition, I don't know if it's really right-wing, because I don't think Shas and Yadut Torah are so right. But if he does not form a coalition with Yadut Torah, Shas, and the religious Zionist party, I think that people are going to be extremely angry with him. So I don't think he has that. I don't think you have a real alternative. On the other hand, if Smotrich and Ben Gvir will not agree to settle maybe other ministerial authorities, then we might see Benny Gantz again as the Minister of Defense, which I think that the right-wing population in Israel will be extremely disappointed.
Thank you so much, Ran, for joining us and for all your insights.
Thank you very much.
2 days after the attack in the industrial area of Ariel, in which 3 Israelis were murdered and 3 others were seriously injured, the Kogat announced on Wednesday the denial of 500 entry, work, and residence permit in Israel of the family members of the terrorists who carried out the attack. According to Kogat, more than 3,000 work permits belonging to family members of Palestinian terrorists have been revoked in the past year. Previously, only more immediate family members would have their entry and work permits to Israel revoked following background checks that would determine if they have ties to terrorists. The 18-year-old terrorist Mohammed Souf was a resident of Khares, a town of about 300-500 residents, worked in the Ariel industrial zone, did not have any prior security offenses and had a valid permit, but not want to enter Israel. The decision, which was made at the end of the security situation assessment conducted by Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi, was approved by Defense Minister Benny Gantz. An oil tanker owned by an Israeli businessman was struck by a bomb-carrying drone off the coast of Oman. More details in the following report. The presumed Iranian-produced drone struck the Liberian-flagged tanker Pacific Zircon, though damages to the ship were minimal. The ship is operated by the Singapore-based Eastern Pacific Shipping, owned by Israeli Idan Ofer. The U.S. Central Command pointed a finger at Iran, saying that the attack against a civilian vessel in the strategic Gulf Straits demonstrates once again the destabilizing actions of the Iranian regime. An Israeli official said that the attack appeared to have been carried out by an Iranian-made Shahed-36 drone. Those same drones have been provided by Iran to Russia for its attacks against targets in Ukraine. In a troubling development, Ukrainian investigators say that Western-made components have been used to build the Iranian drones. Israeli-made infrared lenses were among over 200 components built in the US, Europe, and other allied nations. Ukrainian investigators made the discovery while examining a drone that was hacked mid-flight and landed intact. About half of the technical components were made by US-based firms and about one-third by companies in Japan. The high-resolution telescope is made or copied from the model made by the Israeli firm Ophir Optronics. The company insists that it does not sell parts to Iran and abides by the sanctions. Turning to the Iranian nuclear program, where Iran is failing to meet the IAEA inspection demands. This as Israel officials warned that Iran could have nuclear weapons within 2 years' time. We got more in this report by Steve Leibovich.
I mean, it's like we are talking past each other. We are asking questions and we are not getting answers. Or the answers we are getting are answers, as I think quite, in a very direct way, I characterize them as technically not credible. So we are talking with experts, among experts, and we are saying, well, what you are giving me is not possible. So please, let's try again.
There is currently an impasse between the IAEA and Tehran over uranium traces found at undeclared sites. UN nuclear watchdog Rafael Grossi chastised Iranian avoidance and total lack of credibility, demanding that Iran must go by the rules and start to deliver information on its nuclear program.
One of the things that I often hear is that from some Iranian counterparts is that we are not reflecting something positive. I say, well, start, delivering something. For me, engagement is not simply that you sit down or that we try that already. When you conduct nuclear activities, and Iran has a very ambitious program, you have to go by the rules. And if there is something that was found that should have not been there, you have to explain.
Israeli leaders warned that Iran recently achieved the 90% uranium level required to create a nuclear bomb. The same officials say that Iran is about 2 years from being able to detonate a nuke. Israel is highly critical of the IAEA talks with Iran. The Iranian regime has been enriching uranium beyond the 60% level since April 2021. Israel has been using political pressure while not taking a military strike against Iranian nuclear facilities off the table. In speeches to the United Nations about a decade ago, then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggested that Israel will attack before allowing Iran to pass the 90% threshold.
Those who threaten us with annihilation put themselves in mortal peril. Israel will defend itself with the full force of our arms and the full power of our convictions. As long as Iran's regime seeks the destruction of Israel, Iran will face no fiercer enemy than Israel.
Now that he is returning to office, it will be up to Netanyahu to make policy. Reports from Washington suggest that the crossing of the 90% threshold would be a game changer for the U.S. as well.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hopeful that the new Israeli government will provide his country with long-denied air defense system to protect against Russian missiles. Here are the details. President Zelensky said that he has already reached out to soon-to-be Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with an urgent request for Israeli air defense systems. According to the Ukrainian leader, Netanyahu promised to consider the request and deal with the issue as soon as possible. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine is not asking for offensive weapons, but only for defensive systems to protect Ukrainian civilians. On October 18, Zelensky sent an official request for Israeli defense systems. Earlier this month, Defense Minister Benny Gantz rejected the request, saying that Israel does not have the production capacity to export systems. In the lead-up to the Knesset election, candidate Netanyahu actually has rare praise for Israeli policy on the conflict.
On this one, I think they're taking a prudent policy in the following sense. First of all, Israel has welcomed more refugees from the Ukraine, Jews and non-Jews, disproportionate amount. They're helping out with field hospitals, they're helping with humanitarian aid. On the question of weapons, there's always a possibility, and this has happened time and again, that weapons that we supplied in one battlefield end up in Iranian hands used against us.
Russia has been firing missiles at cities across Ukraine this week, causing damage and death in numerous cities in what described as the heaviest barrage since the start of the invasion in February. More than 100 missiles and at least 10 Iranian-made drones were used in the attacks. Since the start of the invasion, Ukrainian officials have asked Israel to provide missiles defense systems, especially the Iron Dome used so effectively to country's missile fires at Israel from Gaza. Jerusalem has so far avoided providing direct military aid to Kiev in an attempt to cause a crisis in relations with Russia. NASA's Artemis 1 mission finally took off on Wednesday after months of delays and malfunctions. On board are mannequins donning special gear designed by a small Israeli startup. Here with us to discuss this and more is aerospace correspondent of the Jerusalem Post, Yafit Ovadia. Thank you for coming, Yafit.
Thank you, Ami.
So can you elaborate more on the launch details?
Yes, so the Artemis 1 mission just took off on Wednesday, and it launched the Orion spacecraft, which is currently orbiting the moon. This is going to be about a 25-day mission. Now, the Artemis 1 mission plans to eventually launch and send humans to the moon. This is merely a test run. And on board, it's an unmanned mission. There are 2 mannequins. But eventually, the plan is to send humans to the moon and test out to see whether these technologies actually work and can safely transport humans to the moon.
What is the Artemis 1 main goal?
Right, so this is phase 1 of the mission. Phase 2 is to eventually send humans in orbit in the spacecraft to the moon. And the third phase is to actually plant 2 astronauts on the moon, 1 man and 1 woman. Currently, that's slated for 2024, but we've been seeing a lot of delays, so we'll see how that moves forward.
Is there any reason why 1 man, 1 woman?
I think it's all about diversity. NASA's really incorporating more diversity, but I can tell you that this has been a goal to return to the moon after a nearly 50-year hiatus, both by this current U.S. administration and also the previous one.
We have to speak about the Israeli part, the interesting part. What's our part of the mission? Not our, the Israeli part of it.
Right. So there is an Israeli startup called STEMRAD, and what they do is they design special anti-radiation vests to protect astronauts against radiation in space. Now, space is a very harsh environment, and cosmic radiation can cause severe damage to internal organs. Now, what this vest has done is it really protects those astronauts, but so far it's only been tested out by astronauts aboard the International Space Station, so there's no telling whether it will indeed work in deep space. So as part of this mission, there are 2 mannequins, as I mentioned previously, on board the Orion spacecraft. Now, one of them is wearing the vest and one is not. Now, this will help scientists gather crucial data to see if it actually even works. So we'll see.
So that's our Israeli part. And what should we expect moving forward now that it has been launched?
Right. Now it's finally in the air. So this is about a 25-and-a-half-day mission. The NASA Orion spacecraft will travel about 1.3 million miles through space, around 2 million kilometers, and this will be the longest that a spacecraft has ever traveled in space and then later returned back to Earth. So in about a month from now, on December 11th, Orion is planned to make a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean right off the coast of San Diego. And right then, scientists will begin to gather that crucial information to eventually send humans back to the moon.
Do you have any idea of future goals Israel has to do with space?
Right, so the Israeli Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Science, they have recently closed a deal to streamline more money into the space sector. And they really want to plan on supporting and growing this space tech industry, the commercial industry in Israel, to hire more people. That's first of all. And also, as you probably recall, Bereshit 2 is already in action. We've seen collaboration on behalf of multiple companies. They're really eager to participate in the mission, and so that is also slated for 2024. So about a year and a half from now, it should be a very exciting year also for Israel.
A really exciting year and a lot to expect. Thank you so much, Yafit, for joining us.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you very much. In a shocking incident, Antiquities looters digging for treasure near the Bedouin Israeli city of Rahat caught red-handed by the IAA's Antiques Theft Prevention Unit. ILTV's Aaron Porras with the story.
חובת מערבים, 15 נובמבר 2022, שעה 8:50 בערב, תפיסה של חשודים.
Antiquities looters digging for treasures near the Bedouin Israeli city of Rahat caught in the act by the IAA's Antiquities Theft Prevention Unit Tuesday evening.
המפקחים שלנו תפסו את החוליה על חם כשהם חופרים עם כלים בידיים. 3 חשודים מהכפר רהט. הם נתפסו, נחקרו בתחנת המשטרה ברהט, כשיוגש נגדם כתב אישום חמור בגין הפגיעה ממש בקרוב.
The thieves were excavating and destroying historical layers in an Ottoman well next to the Rahat cemetery. They're suspected of searching for a hidden treasure which, according to a Bedouin myth, was buried in the well located in the cave.
החורבה נמצאת ממש קרוב לרהט, חורבה מהתקופה הרומית-ביזנטית, עם שרידים של מבנים, יישוב. החורבה הזו סובלת משוד עתיקות מתמשך. בדרך כלל אנחנו מדברים על תושבים בדואים מהכפר רהט שמגיעים לפה ומחפשים עתיקות. שמנו פה מעקב צמוד, ואכן בלילה, אתמול, הגיעה חוליה של שודדי עתיקות לנקודה הזו כאן, נכנסה לתוך מערה עתיקה והתחילה לחפור בתוך המערה.
זאת זירת תפיסה, חורבת מערבים. בואו נראה מה יש פה. יש פה חפירות חדשות. יש פה דלי, פרוז'קטור, בור עמוק, ובפנים יש לנו מקוש ודלי.
The 20-something-year-old suspects, meantime, arrested and taken in for questioning, one of whom was charged on similar offenses in 2020, for which he received a punishment of 6 months in jail, followed by probation and a fine of 30,000 shekel. That said, the punishment for damaging or looting archaeological sites can be up to 5 years in prison, as it's viewed as a grave criminal offense.
Moving on, the World Zionist Organization now providing an incredible opportunity to connect to the Zionist heritage and maybe even win an amazing trip around the world while you're at it. And it's all through the unique Zionist app. Created by the World Zionist Organization and the Zionist Council in Israel, Zionist is your one-stop shop for all things in Israel and Zionism. It includes information resources, trivia, a Zionist event calendar, and a database of personalities, historically important dates, and everything you might want to know about Zionism, Israeli heritage, and history. But on top of a huge encyclopedia of knowledge, there's also the Zionist trivia competition, complete with a huge top prize. Those who enter the top 10 lists in the tournament will have their chance to compete in the final broadcast live on Israeli Channel 12 on Israel's Independence Day. And the winning family will earn a flight to follow Theodor Herzl's famous footsteps. So download Zionist now for free on both the Google Play and Apple App Store marketplaces. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies and rain expected around the country tonight, with lows this evening averaging 12 degrees Celsius or 54 Fahrenheit. And then tomorrow, alongside sunny skies, we see top temperatures ranging from mid to high 20s. And finally, on Saturday, we can expect more of the same in terms of weather and temperature. Now, that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Telegram, and subscribe to our ILTV newsletter. I'm Amit Harari. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for watching.